Hello, everyone. This is Rosalind Sedacca, and you're listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. And this is Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living with Rosalind Sedacca. And as you know, I'm founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network, a divorce and co-parenting coach, and the creator of several ebooks and courses on divorce and dating when you're a parent. And I'm very excited to introduce you today to our guest, Andy Heller. Andy has been with us before, and he's the author of a wonderful book, Take the High Road, that talks about various factors of divorce from a very dispassionate but important facet, so that you're getting insights that are really valuable for you every step of the way, before, during, and after divorce. And Andy himself has gone through a divorce, and that's why he wrote his book. So Andy, tell us the full name of your book and a quick intro about yourself, and we'll get started.
Sure. My book is Take the High Road, Divorce with Compassion for Yourself and Your Family. And I am a businessman. I'm not a co-parent counselor like you, Rosalind, or a divorce attorney or a therapist. And I went through my own divorce. I read a lot of books. I had some fantastic therapy helping to support me. And I realized that there was a gap in the divorce book space, which I'm trying to fill. So you have wonderful books out there that are resources that have been written by field experts, and their opinions are biased because they are certainly experts in their space. So I saw a need for kind of a different type of a book on two levels. So first is that I'm a businessman, and I felt that I could go ahead and collect this counsel and interview dozens of co-parent counselors like yourself and therapists and attorneys, and present the best of their guidance in an objective way. That's the first thing. The second thing is that with all these great books I read, I noticed that there was a gap. What I mean by that is divorce is an experiential journey. And during this journey, you're going to do some things that you're pretty proud of. You're going to make some mistakes, look back like, man, I wish I had that bug in my ear. I would have handled that situation so differently if I had some counsel before. And you're going to do some things kind of average. And that's just the way it is, guys. It's a process. So with my book, I'm taking 46 tips and strategies that you typically only learn when you go through the journey. And we're arming the divorcee with these tips on day one, with a stated goal of themselves, their spouse, and most importantly, that the children all land in a healthier space, because the divorcee has the advice on day one, not day 200 or 300 or 400. And my book is just out, Rosalind, but the number one thing I'm proud of today is the early reviews from the therapy and support community like yourself has been stellar. And they've all pretty much said the same thing. It's about time there was a book like this, where kind of a roadmap of best practices and strategies of how to get through the divorce for yourself and your kids and land in a better place. That's my story.
And I validate what you're saying. I think it's an excellent book. I like your approach, and I like the personal anecdotal stories you tell that humanize the situation and make it relatable for people who are reading the book. Our topic for today is co-parenting in toxic waters. And sadly, too many people do co-parent in toxic waters, whether they initiate that themselves, whether it's the divorce partner who's initiating the toxicity, or whether it's the fact that both sides just don't know how to create a more amicable approach. So what your advice is very important for us today. And let's start talking about some communication tips that can help co-parents when they're dealing with an uncooperative or combative co-parent or soon-to-be co-parent.
Fantastic. I love this topic, Rosalind, and frankly, one of my favorite topics, and I spend a lot of time with this on the book. But before I give you a tip, let me give you something encouraging for you and your followers. There is almost always, and I must have interviewed I don't know, 4 or 5 dozen divorcees as I put this book together. And there was one thing that was almost always in common to everybody. There was a period of time, for some 3 months, some 6 months, some a couple of years, where it was so difficult to communicate with the former partner. And the problem is, during that time, you've got to be able to manage your children's lives and co-parent effectively. You don't want to screw up your kids during that time just because you can't talk with your ex-spouse. So you've got a job to do, but its communication is challenging. So the positive message, Rosalind, is that almost always it gets better, okay? And having that in the back of your mind while you're going through the worst of the worst can hopefully help encourage you and remind you that this is probably temporary. It's probably not going to be this bad in a year or 2 years. I've just got to have skills and strategies for managing during the worst of the worst. So it will almost always improve. So one of the unique angles of my book is I'm a businessman, and through working and interviewing varied therapists, I came up with a series of suggestions and strategies that actually are business communication skills that a lot of therapists use, that I've introduced these to the divorcee. I'll give you some of my favorite ones. So one of those, Rosalind, is in some of the most toxic of divorces. You'll find, you'll say up, he'll say down. You'll say right, she'll say left. In other words, anything suggestion that you own, your former partner is going to push back on. Okay. Acknowledging and realizing that that is your situation is actually the first step to coming up with a strategy. Okay, just accept it. All right, I can't initiate a suggestion right now because it's going to be shot down. So one of the skills that we introduce in one of the chapters, and one of my favorite tips, Rosalind, is changing how you communicate with your spouse, former spouse. So one of those suggestions is stop offering suggestions, because you know it's going to be shot down. Instead, communicate only in the form of a question and defer to your former partner to come up with a solution. Let me give you an example. This little Johnny's complaining about going to ballet. Both spouses feel that it would be good for him, but he doesn't want to do it any longer. All right. One of the mom says, I really think he should then go to basketball. All right. But I'm not sure how that will land on the father. So instead of saying in the email, hey, I'm getting pushback to my house on ballet, let's introduce basketball instead as an extracurricular activity, define the problem and ask for a solution. Hey, Bob, I'm having a real problem in my house. Little Johnny is constantly complaining about ballet. It's probably happening in your house too. What do you suggest? Now, the hope here, Rosalind, is your former spouse will come back with a suggestion that is similar to what you want or close to it, okay? That would be perfect. That doesn't always happen. Mm-hmm. But you allow your former partner to own the suggestion. So let's say that the former spouse comes back with an answer that is maybe a step in the right direction that's not right there. Then again, the response is, I really like this part of what you said. We still, though, have a problem. Here's the problem. What do you suggest? So you're changing the texture and the words that you use in your communication. And this doesn't work all the time. There's a whole bunch of strategies out there, but this is one business strategy that is commonly used in very toxic business relationships. And we carry this into a divorce. Very successful strategy. Again, nothing's 100%, but changing the texture of how you communicate and allowing your former spouse to own the suggestions is going to reduce the conflict points that you have.
I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And if their suggestion is not close enough, do you make a suggestion, or do you still give them an opportunity to, by asking another question?
ask another question. And it also requires a bit of patience. So it might take 3 or 4 exchanges using this strategy. And then once you've realized that you're at the final offer from your former spouse, then you got to come and try to push them towards a final solution. But again, it's all about allowing them to own the primary suggestions. And because you're offering fewer, what you're really basically doing, Rosalind, is if you imagine there's a fire, is you're not throwing fuel on the fire. Okay. And this, believe it or not, everybody, brings down the toxic levels to where it's more manageable. But this is, again, one of the strategies. There's about, I don't know, at least 7 or 8 different strategies we offer in the book for the most high conflict divorces where it's really difficult to co-parent effectively.
I think focusing on more dispassionate business-like approaches is really a smart idea, because the chances are very good that both parents have been emotionally embroiled during the pre-divorce and the conflict during the divorce, and they've tried everything they know how to do, and they keep butting heads and getting into the same outcomes. So this is a new approach that can catch partners off guard, be a little unexpected, and create a little more respect and dignity in the communication, where you're not bombarding someone or pushing their buttons, but by asking questions. So I like it. It's a sensible strategy that is much more likely to work, especially if you haven't tried it before.
Yeah, one of the divorcees I interviewed said this one strategy completely did a 180 in his relationship with his ex. And because, in their household, she basically was a great homemaker and managed a household. She was used to making decisions and owning the decisions. And part of what wasn't working was in a joint legal custody environment, the ex-husband now had the ability to say, hey, this is what I want. And this was a very new phenomenon. So this is also respectful in that it makes it easier on your former spouse, whether it's the husband or the wife, whoever was used to kind of ruling the roost, to slowly understand there's a new world here. Okay, in joint legal custody, one of the other interesting points that we discuss in the book, almost always, one of the spouses is getting used to having more control and a stronger say. One of the spouses is getting used to having less say in the lives. And that's an adjustment for both sides. And even if your former spouse is the one that's getting used to less control, one of the things that you want to do is try to be empathetic. That might be the last thing on your list, but by being empathetic, it's like, she's probably undergoing a recalibration they're not too happy about. Okay, I'm not going to poke the bear. Let her settle into the new world with this joint legal custody, reduce the toxic points, and hopefully we'll land in a place where we can co-parent effectively. I'll give you another real easy one. In the business world, when you use 2 words, the word you and the word but, studies have shown it results in pushback. When you use the word you, people feel like they're being spoken to. When they use the word but, people feel like they're whatever they want is being demeaned. So we talk about in one of the chapters, recalibrating your communications via text and email to never use those 2 words. And again, this is not easy for some people that don't come from this background of a business person, but these are really, really helpful tips to allowing your spouse on the other end of the email or the text to relax a little bit. Okay.
Yes. We're going to take a quick break here, Andy. Just want to remind everyone that this is Rosalind Sedacca with Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network, and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. This is Rosalind Sedacca with WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. You're listening to Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living with Rosalind Sedacca, and we're talking to book author Andy Heller, whose book is Take the High Road, which is a wonderful title for a book that really offers some unique approaches to getting the outcome you want, especially when you're parents dealing with difficult co-parenting challenges and other challenges that come up with divorce. So Andy, you were talking about another strategy for us.
Yeah. So there's a host of strategies that we use when dealing with a toxic situation with your ex while trying to manage children's lives and co-parent effectively. So another great one I can offer you, Rosalind, is the use of a business tool called the time card. Okay. The time card is basically pushing down the road as many decisions as possible. There's two benefits to this. One is we human beings, we're all flawed. We all have this crazy thing called the emotion chip. And with emotion, it sometimes affects our ability to make sound decisions. Statistically, the longer we take to think things through, the better decisions we make. So the use of time card is actually a business tool and brought into the divorce. So things come up with your children, all right? If they're logistically in nature, you tend to have to deal with them right on the spot, okay? So that would go into one bucket, Rosalind, all right? But there are other things that come up where decisions don't need to be made right away. So on these, you want to use a time card. You basically say to your ex, oh, I'm going to get back to you on that one. Let me think it through. Okay. Now, there are two benefits to that. One, if you give yourself the time to think things through, you're going to be able to think about the book that I wrote and some of the suggestions on how to communicate better with your ex on these difficult topics. So you'll do a better job of dealing with the issues that are arising. That's the first point. The second point, particularly with children, some things that were issues today are completely off the child's radar in a week. All right. So for example, let's go back to our example of little Johnny complaining about ballet. All right. Well, a week later, he's changed his mind. He said, okay, I'll do ballet, but I want you to also add basketball. So the issue has been solved. And by delaying that, because you realize, all right, I don't have to decide on this right now, because basketball registration is not for 3 weeks, all right? And it's one less thing to deal with my former spouse right now. So that's good. And by pushing that down the road, it turned out that that issue solved itself. So particularly with children, a lot of issues end up solving themselves. And again, it just takes one thing off the list of issues to have to deal with your ex. So the message there, Rosalind, is if there's fewer things that you have to talk to your ex about, you're going to be able to do a better job. And that helps also to bring down the level of anxiety and angst that's out there right now.
Yeah, which is always the goal, because the more relaxed and less stressed both parties are, the better the relationship will be overall. And the easier life is for the kids, because kids pick up on the stress, the tension, the conflict, and they want to help fix it. They want to protect you as parents. And of course, they can't do that. So we don't want to burden them with those kinds of stressors. So reducing your stress reduces stress for everyone in the family. Do you have any co-parenting tips that may not be instinctive that you suggest in your book?
Well, that's a great question. I'm going to give one of my favorite, that was also one of the reasons that led me to write this book. So I always consider myself, Rosalind, to be a very reasonable, very compromise-oriented person. Okay, and yes, during my own divorce, I'm proud to say I recognized I needed a little bit of help myself because my emotions were at a high level. So I went ahead and found myself a therapist And I specifically sought out a therapist who had dealt with a lot of divorced men. And I found this a woman in the Bay Area, and she was amazing. Okay. So I cannot count how many times, Rosalind, something would happen with my ex. And I'd walk in, I was all fired up. I'd say, you know what, this is what happened, but don't worry, I've got this thing thought through, and this is what I'm going to do. It's a reasonable decision. And she would listen to me respectfully and say, Andy, thank you.
So,
But actually, you're not going to do that. You're actually going to do the opposite. And she would come up with a different recommendation. And I was floored how many times, Rosalind, that when I heard her counsel come out of her mouth, and it was opposite of what I intended to do, and how sensible it sounded, I'm like, oh my God, here I am. I'm a grounded guy, a reasonable guy. How often my gut instincts were wrong. And I'm like, I'm lucky I had this lady guiding me and other support people in my life. How about all those divorcees that don't have that, which is one reason why I wrote the book. So one of my favorite stories is on custodial exchanges. And this tends to be a high conflict area, and a very common high conflict area with divorces. Okay. So Aunt Edna is coming in town unexpectedly. It happens to be your ex-wife's schedule, and you ask her to trade. All right. These situations happen all the time. She says no, and you're all pissed off. All right. So we had a situation, and I came in and I said, you know, I'm not getting this exchange that I want. She wants this, and I'm going to tell her, give me what I want. I'm going to give you what you want. That sounded like it was sensible to me. But I was 100% wrong. The right answer, everybody, is you say yes to every request that is reasonable and every request that is in the children's best interest. And under no circumstance do you link request. Yes, and I remember saying to my therapist, I said, but wait a second, this could create a situation where I'm saying yes, 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 and she's saying no, 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 no.
mhm.
That's not fair. Her answer was, put your big boy pants on. It's not fair, but that's what's in the best interest of your children. And you continue to say yes, and the likelihood is one day it might happen with an issue around it. It might just happen organically. I don't know. But one day you're going to notice a change on the other end. And that is exactly what happened, Rosalind.
Mhm.
So this is one of my most powerful stories I talk about in the book. I was 100% certain that what I was doing was the right thing, and I was so incredibly wrong. And that's why I wrote this book, is not everybody's going to have the time, the funds, or the wherewithal to seek out a therapist like that, or have somebody like you as a co-parent counselor in their lives. But you have to be able to make these choices and these decisions, because this is going to benefit your children, and ultimately it's going to benefit you too.
Exactly.
So, the last thing I'll say before I take your comments around that, I cannot tell you how many times, how difficult that was to continue to say yes, 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 yes. Well, I felt it was not being reciprocated. It's not an easy thing to process,
Mhm.
but I hope that for all your listeners, this powerful tip makes a lot of sense. Whatever is in your children's best interest, it's your responsibility as the more reasonable parent to say yes. And you cannot link your yes to whatever you're hearing from him or her at the other end.
Yeah, that's so important. And basically that's taking the high road.
That's taking the high road.
But what's best for your kids ultimately will be best for both parents, and it's taking the high road. And in the long run, you get better results. You're not going to get instantaneously better results in that week or maybe that month, but in the long run, that's what happens. So your wisdom is well applied and definitely appreciated. In the few minutes that we have left, I just wanted you to give us your takeaway thoughts, the wisdom that you want our viewers to take away and contemplate after hearing this interview?
Wow. Well, it's interesting you use the words takeaway, because after each one of my 46 tips, I give a takeaway point, a summary point that the reader can walk away with. Writing this book was an 8-year journey for me. On some level, it was also therapeutic for me, Rosalind. I am, by nature, an admittedly, and I'm in therapy for it, I am an eternal optimist, everybody. I've always been, the glass is half full, and I can tell you that my outlook on life was really challenged there for a few years. But I can tell you, what came into this book are dozens of interviews from professionals like Rosalind, attorneys, family therapists, parenting coaches, and divorcees who have difficult divorces and landed in good places. It almost always gets better. And the more work you can do, such as attending podcasts like this, reading books like mine, if you can, reach out and find yourself a Hall of Fame therapist like I did. The more things you can do to get control of your emotions during this difficult time, the better it's going to be for your children, and the better it's going to be for you. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that what I was so floored by with, and I shared a little bit this with my own story, is how my own decision making was impacted negatively impacted by emotions. And I was frankly unaware to the degree of that until I got the feedback from my therapy during these different sessions from the therapist. Andy, I heard you, but that's not what you're going to do. And here's why: your thinking is off. Yeah. So all of you need help. It's not shameful to ask for help, but go get help. And that's going to help you land in a better place. And most importantly, I know that's why we're here, it's going to be good for your children, because you don't have the skills to take care, to always make these right decisions for your children. We don't have the skills to do this on our own, and particularly when we're emotionally compromised during the most challenging times of our separation and divorce.
Yeah, and that's for sure. Thank you, Andrew Hellard. This has been a wonderful interview. You've given us great insights about divorce that everyone can take away and make good use of. Take the High Road is the book. And thank you for joining us. I hope you'll join us again next time. This is Rosalind Sedacca with the Child-Centered Divorce Network. Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living is the show on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. Until next time, take care of yourself and your children. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
I haven't stopped the recording button. Stop recording.